My name is Donald Beam. I'm a hematologist-oncologist, specializing in pediatrics. I've been here at Cook for over 18 years now. I started off as a regular hematologist, and now I'm actually the head of our department. We have 21 physicians now who work with cancer and blood disorders. I still remember the morning I came in after Josey had come into the hospital. That night, when my partners had admitted her, she had come in with severe anemia. That's a very low red blood cell count, the blood cells that carry oxygen around your body. We see this occasionally with people who have issues with infections. We see occasionally people who are born with problems with that. But before this, Josey had not really had any issues. So when she came in, initially we thought, okay, well, this is probably something that's temporary. She got a blood transfusion to help her out, and we saw that her blood counts came up, and we said, okay, we'll let you go home and we'll follow you up in clinic and see how things are going. And surprisingly, the next month she came in and she again was severely anemic. So she got another blood transfusion. At that time, we're like, okay, this is something unusual because most people do recover quite quickly when this happens, but we saw that she was not. And what's interesting is she wasn't making any red blood cells. She had normal white blood cells, normal platelets, the blood cells that help make blood clots, as well as the blood cells that fight infection, but there were no production of new red blood cells. So in following her, we said, okay, well, we need to see the factory of blood cells. Go into a bone marrow. When we take a needle, we put it into the core of your bones, usually in your hip, and look and see how the cells are all made. At that time, when we did that, we saw that she had a ton of cells in her bone marrow to make the blood cells, but none of them were maturing and getting out into the circulation of her body. We looked for a whole bunch of different things. We looked to see, is there an infection that is causing this? We looked to see, is this related to some kind of toxin? There was some issues potentially with exposure in the past. We looked at genetics. Obviously, we looked to see if there was any evidence of a leukemia or a cancer. That's what most people would worry about when your child comes in with severe blood cell problems. But basically, everything was normal. We tried to stimulate her bone marrow to make more with hormones that we use often, and nothing seemed to work. She continued to have problems with anemia and was getting blood transfusions at least monthly, and this continued for years, where we saw this decreased problems with production of red blood cells. During this time, not only did she have problems with her red blood cells, she intermittently had a few white blood cell problems as well, which made us repeat the bone marrow. I think she got a total of 3 different tests to look at her marrow to see how things were working, and we had no answers. We reached out to our colleagues. Obviously, we don't live in a vacuum. We have great physicians around the country, and I reached out to some expert physicians that were not only in Houston at Texas Children's, we queried over in Dallas, we actually went to Boston, Chicago, Seattle, everyone to see and transmitted information about her bone marrow, her test results. We did a lot of genetic testing to see if there's something that was there before, and nothing. We couldn't find any reasons for this. The whole time, she continued to do well after the transfusions, but when she needed another transfusion, it was pretty obvious her color would start to fade, her energy level would start to go down. And so we then started talking about, okay, do you need a bone marrow transplant for this? One of the problems is when you have no production of blood cells, we obviously can continue with transfusions, but is that a long-term thing? Or we can try to replace the factory where your blood cells are made. So we had a workup for Josey to see if she had a match for her bone marrow, and we had her meet with our bone marrow transplant team. I think a little bit of this is very scary because the process itself has a great response in that we can cure you of your problem, but it is risky. And at least 1 in 20 people who have a bone marrow transplant may die. Yeah, this caused her mom a lot of concern, but she was doing okay with transfusions, so we continued those right then to kind of work it out and see where we needed to go. And then she came into clinic one day and she didn't need a transfusion. It was absolutely amazing. I was like, well, that's unusual. She's never done this. She was doing pretty well. And her mother relayed that she had met someone who felt that Josey was going to be fine. She said they laid hands and said, your daughter's going to be good. This is fine. And after that, her blood counts all returned back to normal. And just seeing her last week, I told her mom, I was like, there's not an arrow anywhere on your blood count. Everything's totally normal, just like anyone who walks in off the street. And that's where we are. I have no good explanation as to what went on for years with requiring blood transfusions. And then, bam, she's back to normal. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a miracle.